Alrighty, guys, we are back, and this time we're going to talk about converting the data types of variables. All right. So first things first, if you're in this file and you want to use it or follow along or run it as an example, I'm going to show you how to comment out the part that you don't want to run. Okay, just to reiterate, this green part at the top up here, this is all a comment. And I don't think we talked about that in the last video. A comment is something that is put into your code for human beings to read. It is not going to be turned into Python code. Python is not going to try to run it. Python just completely ignores it. It's for human beings to take notes on what we're doing. So up here at the top, you see these 3 single quotation marks. That's how you can make a multi-line comment. So in other words, everything between these first 3 quotation marks and these last 3 quotation marks over here, all of that is a comment. Python's not going to try to run it. It's just for me and you to read. All right. Down here, you see I have another multi-line comment. It starts here with these 3. It ends here with these 3. If you look down here at this part of my code, it's commented out as well, but not in the same way. So these are single line comments. And what that means is each line has to have a special symbol on it, so Python knows to know it's a comment and not try to run it. And that special symbol is a hash. All right, so Python is going to put a lot of hashes in front of here, okay? But you really only need one. So if you look up here in my code, this is a single line comment, right? And this is a single line comment. And I'm not sure if we talked about this either real quick. Probably we did, but I'm going to turn on my line numbers. All right. So what I want to do right now is I want to comment out all this code because we're done with that. We did that in the last video. And I want to uncomment out all this code down here because that's the part we're going to work on right now. So I'm going to highlight from lines 20 to 29. That's the code that I don't want to run anymore, but I don't want to get rid of it either because I might want to come back and uncomment it out and run it again later. Definitely might want to change it up or use it again. So I don't want to get rid of it. I just want to tell Python not to run it anymore. I'm going to go to Format, Comment Out Region. Right? And as you can see, it added a bunch of hash marks in front of the lines. So now I'm going to come down here to the rest of the code. Everything that you see in red from lines 41 to lines 65, I commented these out earlier. Now I'm going to uncomment them out. And to do that, I'm going to go to Format, Uncomment Region. Perfect. All right, so now we're going to talk about data types and how to convert between different data types. So in order to talk about conversion, we have to understand what data types are and which ones exist. For the purposes of this class, we're going to talk about 4 different data types. All right, first of all, we have the string. A string is always wrapped in a set of quotation marks. They can be single or double quotation marks as long as the first one matches the last one. All right, what do I mean by that? Well, this right here, not this whole entire line of code, but just this part right here is a string. I know because it's wrapped in a set of quotation marks. All right, I could just have easily used single quotation marks in here. I prefer the double, but it's up to you. So that's a string. Python sees it only as a series of characters, letters, symbols, things like that. Okay, even if I had, this is just an example, even if I had a variable called num and I assigned it a 6 like this, that's still a string. It's not actually a number because it has the quotation marks around it. Python sees it as the symbol of the number 6, not the number 6 in the capacity that it could do math with it or say it's greater than 5 or anything like that. To Python, that 6 is no different than this 8. It's just a symbol. All right, so strings cannot do math. All of the examples of variables that we've been using so far have been strings. Okay, so if you come back up here and you remember, we hard-coded the string Fayetteville. Let me uncomment this out so we can look at it. This was a string, right? Now, it's probably not obvious to you guys, and you wouldn't know unless I told you, but day of the week and weather are also strings. So anytime we call this input function and the user types something in when it runs, remember we typed in Monday for hours? Well, that term or that value Monday is saved as a string by default. It doesn't matter what the user puts in when the program runs, whether they type in a 6, they type in 100, they type in yes, they type in Amanda, whatever they type in, is always going to be returned and saved in the variable as a string every single time by default. So if the user types in a 10, Python's going to see it as like this, all right, when it's returned from the input statement. So if I had something like this and it said num equals input, and then I said, hey, instead of doing all that, let's just give me a number. All right, when this program runs and the user types in a 6 or a 10 or something, Python's going to see it as a string. So that means we cannot directly just start doing math with it. We have to convert it into a data type that's able to actually handle mathematical calculations. All right, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to comment this back out, and we are going to do some examples. Actually, we're going to talk about a couple more data types first. All right, so if you do want to make it a number, say we wanted to actually have that 6 be seen as a 6 or a 10 or whatever, so we could do math with it, we need to convert it to an integer data type. An integer data type is a whole number. It does not have any places after the decimal, nor is it allowed to. It can be used in math. All right, and then we have the float. The float is also a number data type. It is allowed to have places after the decimal. It can have 1 place after the decimal, or it can have 100 places after the decimal, or even more than that, okay? So the only difference between the two, they can both be used in math equations, is that an integer is a whole number with no places after the decimal, and a float is a decimal number where there's at least 1 place after the decimal, even if that place after the decimal is a 0. So like 2.0, that's a float, all right? 290, integer. All right, 0.1, repeating, float. All right, cool. You can use those together. You can add them together, multiply them together. You can use them in math equations, no problem. All right, there's one more data type that we're going to talk about, and it's called the bool, B-O-O-L, see it right here. And that comes from the entire term Boolean. It's named after old school mathematician or programmer. And what it means is it can be one of two things, true or false. That's it. No other options will constitute a Boolean variable. All right, so I could say something like is married, right? And maybe if they are married, we assign true. If they're not married, we assign false. All right, so those Boolean variables can only be true or false. All right, so let's talk about how we can convert them. So we're starting off down here and we've got this variable called age, and we're saying, okay, let's get some input from the user. We're going to ask the user, how old are you? They're going to type something in and we're going to save it in the age variable. All right, then we're going to print it back out to them and we're going to say, hey, you are however many years they are, right? Whatever they gave us up here, you are that many years old. Well, let's think about what kind of data type we'd first want to convert it into. Normally, we as human beings don't say I'm 29.3 years old or I'm, 7.75 years old. We usually give a whole number, right? So we're going to use an integer for that. I'm going to comment out some of this stuff down here so we can just run this one example real quick. So I'm going to use my multi-line comment and I'm going to go from here to the bottom. And what we're going to do is go ahead and give this a run, all right? But we're also going to put another print statement in here. I'm going to show you guys a function that's really helpful. It's called the type function, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say type, and inside of these parentheses, I'm going to put the variable that I want to know the type of. And for now, we're talking about age, right? In order to get this to come out to the screen, we're going to wrap it in a print function. So the type function is going to tell us what data type the age variable is, and we're going to print that to the screen. All right, and then we're going to print the string, you are age years old. All right, let's give it a run and see what it does. All right, we're going to tell it I'm 44. I'm going to press enter. All right, what this is saying right here is, you can sort of ignore this class part for now, but it's saying str, and I bet you can probably guess which one of our variable types that is. That's the string, right? So currently the variable age is a string, and if you remember up here, we said that we can't do math with strings. All right, so if I tried to say older age equals age plus 10, let's see what happens. Let's see if it can calculate this older age variable. All right, we're trying to take the variable age that we already have, and we're trying to add 10 to it, and then we want to save it back into this variable called older underscore age. So let's give it a run. And we'll say 44 again. Uh-oh, we got an error. All right, an error means something is wrong in our program. Python cannot turn it into Python code behind the scenes, right? It can't interpret it. It doesn't know what you're trying to do essentially. And so the program crashes and it throws an error. And then it's going to give us an error message. Keep in mind, this error message is not the most user-friendly. You sort of have to read between the lines as to what's going on. All right, so it's saying we have an error on line 49. So we can come back over here and look at line 49. So that's where we're trying to do this math and then save it in this older age variable. That's the line that's causing the issue. All right. It is saying that it can only concatenate a string, not an integer, to a string. All right. Concatenation is something that we'll talk about later on. It means when you put one string after another one, sort of like you're adding on to the end of a string or a sentence. So you can technically put two strings together, but it's not considered addition. It's called this concatenation. All right, so essentially it's saying, hey, one of your things is a string and one of your things is an integer. And there's no way I can put those two things together. So what we need to do is we need to take age, which is our string, right? This is an integer. And we need to convert age into an integer as well so that we can add together the two integer data types. That will not throw an error. That will work. All right. So let's put a comment in here, and I'm going to convert age to an integer. And I'm going to do that by calling the integer function. It looks like this. And whatever I put inside of these parentheses, that's going to be converted into an integer. All right, so I want to convert age. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually put this print statement, I'm going to copy it where I printed out the data type. And after I've converted it into an integer, I'm going to print the data type again. All right, so we should see it go from a string to an integer. Then what am I going to do? Put another comment in here, and I'm going to say, okay, now we do a calculation, which is adding 10. All right, and then we're going to display the information to the user. All right, and I'm actually going to add another print statement in here, and I'm going to say print in 10 years you will be. I'm going to put a comma because now I'm done printing my string. Now I'm going to print a variable. So I'm printing something different now. So I've put the comma in there. In 10 years, you will be. Now I'm going to print older age, whatever that variable holds. It should be a number, right? All right. So just to reiterate, we have this age variable here. We're getting the value from the user once the program runs. We're printing out what the data type is currently. Then we're converting it into a different data type. We're converting it into an integer, a whole number. Then we're going to have Python tell us once again, hey, what's the data type now? Then we're going to take that value, which should be an integer. We're going to add it to another integer. And we're going to save it in this variable called older age. By the way, if both of these are integers, the data type of the resulting sum, so after we add them together and save it in older age, it's automatically an integer as well. Okay. And then we're going to print these two lines. All right, we're going to print our first variable here, and then we're going to print the new variable older underscore age. Let's check it out. All right, so how old are you? Let's say we're 44. Uh-oh, something's wrong. All right, this is real life. This is how coding works. Something is wrong, okay? So it's still mad here. Oh, here's what we did, you guys. So what I did was I forgot to assign this back to a new variable, okay? So this piece of code converts age into an integer, but it does not save it back into the age variable, all right? So what we need to do is we need to put a piece of code out here that says, hey, after you convert age to an integer, save it back into the variable age. So you're essentially assigning a new value to age. All right, now you're assigning the integer. So if they put in 44, it was a string up here. We're converting it into the integer 44, and we're resaving it in the age variable. So let's give it a run now. And 44. Perfect. So the first time around, it was a string. After line 49, we converted it. It's no longer a string. It was now an integer. And we say you are 44 years old. In 10 years, you will be 54. Perfect. All right, nice. So what I'm going to do now is comment all that out. We're going to move along. We're just going to do a couple more quick examples. All right. So now I'm down here. And we're going to convert to a float this time. All right. So I'm going to uncomment this out. And we've got a couple things going on here. I'm going to comment these guys out for now. And we are looking at line 64. And we say, how many ounces of apples do you have? All right. Then we're going to find the conversion rate for ounces to pounds. And we're going to tell them how many pounds of apples they have. Okay. So we're going to convert from ounces to pounds and display the results. All right, so if this was a program that you actually had to do, you would need to think, how do I figure out how to convert ounces into pounds? All right, and many, many times you're going to have to go to the internet and search for some piece of information in order to create the logic correctly. So I'm going to say ounces to pounds. All right. All right, and actually I am so lucky because the internet is great, and it says here, divide the mass value by 16, and if I keep looking, I see since 1 ounce is equal to 1/16 of a pound, the formula for the conversion is pounds equals ounces divided by 16. That's golden for us, all right? So let's take a look back at our program. And let's go ahead and put in the conversion rate. So we can actually type it just like they had it, because guess what? We called ounces, ounces. So we can say pounds equals ounces divided by 16. All right, nice. Now, if you remember, we're missing one very important part, right? We have to convert ounces into a float. Why do I say we want to make it a float? Well, when we're measuring pounds and ounces and weights of stuff, we do often use a decimal number after the whole number. So if something weighs 1 1/4 pounds, The decimal number would be 1.25, right? So let's go ahead and write the code. Remember, we have to say the variable name that we want to save the value back in after we convert it. We're going to use the same name, all right? And we're going to convert it. This time we use the float function. So we type it. This time we use the whole word, all right? Python sees it, the float function, as this whole entire word right here. And we have to pass inside of the parentheses the variable that we want to convert. So we're going to convert ounces into a float and save it back in the variable ounces. Now, Python should have no problem doing this math here. And let's display the results. All right, let's just print. And we're going to print a string that says you have. All right, I'm going to close that up. I'm going to put a comma because now I'm going to print the number of pounds, right? Whatever pounds is. I'm going to put a comma because I'm going to still print a little more of a string. I'm not done yet. Of apples. Oh, probably need the word pounds in here, huh? So you have however many pounds of apples. All right, this does not print the word pounds. Remember that. It prints whatever value is being held up here, which is a number. So if theoretically this was like 3.5, the print statement would read, you have 3.5 pounds of apples. All right, let's give it a run. Let's see what we got. Alrighty, so the code is running and it says, how many ounces of apples do you have? I'm going to put a value in here. Just to make one thing clear, we're converting this into a float. You actually could put an integer in here and it wouldn't cause a problem because we can convert an integer into a float really easily by just putting a .0 on the end of it. So if I was to put in like 700 right now, that would be fine. It would work, okay? Or I could put 458.5888. All right, that'll work too. Let's see what we got. You have 28.6618 pounds of apples. And I actually did previously do this math over on that website that I had found just to double check myself, and you should always do the same. And that number is correct. So we did great. All right. I just want to make a point real quick that I said if we put an integer in here for ounces, it wouldn't be a problem because Python would just take the 5 and it would turn it into 5.0. No problem. You cannot do it the other way around. If it's expecting to get an integer over here, it will not take the float and directly convert it into an integer. All right. So one more thing we're going to take a look at here is using a boolean variable. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to comment all this out. So that way we can take a look at these 2 lines of code right here. All right. And this time, I'm actually not going to get a value from the user, and I'm not going to convert it either, because very rarely would you actually ask the user to type in true or false like this, because the user would have to type it in exactly right. It would have to have a capital T or a capital F. All right, so when you use these true and false Boolean values, you don't wrap them in quotation marks. If you wrap them in quotation marks, it's going to be a string. All right, so you don't wrap them in quotes, and they have to be exactly like this. They should turn a specific color. In idle, it's orange. Look, if I do a small f, it doesn't work. It has to be a capital F. So very rarely would you ask the user to type in or give you input as true or false. Instead, you as the programmer will probably use something like this if you want to represent a certain action, like is the user logged into the computer? If they're not, it should equal false. If they are logged in, it should equal true. Right? So I'm just going to show an example of this. We're going to give it a run real quick. And it's going to say, user currently logged in, true. All right? If I had put false, it would print false. So this is all for this video. There will be one more video in this module. It's going to be a slight example showing you how to work on one of the homework, specifically homework 1, and that will be the last video in this series. So hopefully you guys can stick around for that, and I'll see you there.